Ida for exposing mother's abuse publicly after she tried to claim online that I was missing and in danger when I wasn't. This will be part 1 because it's a lot, and I'm remaking this to try to make it more fluent and less confusing. I never posted on here before, I just heard this might be a good place to communicate this on, so I wasn't familiar with what all information's normally included in these posts other than the stories themselves. I'm nearly 20F currently, like he'll be in like 2.5 months kind of thing. My mother, let's call her A, was always incredibly abusive both physically and verbally. Stuff ranged from convincing me I was a mistake and only a product of RP that wasn't wanted at all, which fed a lot into my depression, self-harming, and suicidal thoughts when I was younger a lot, to full physical abuse like kicking, hitting, etc., and whenever I tried to address what I had to go through with her since I was an older teen, it was always dismissed, or she would either defend her actions or just blame me entirely for it happening while also completely overlooking my declining mental health. I never knew my father, as like I said I was always believed to be a mistake that shouldn't have been here in the first place, and I was only kept because she was pushed to by her parents when she was a young adult, which is also why I think she's always rejected me as her child a lot. I was mainly around my grandparents, especially my grandfather, growing up because she was either just not around or she would be abusive, and a lot of family wasn't aware in the first place because of how little I was around them. But the only main role model or closest thing I had to a father figure or positive influence in the first place whenever I wasn't around A. She would also go through a new guy every few months, sometimes weeks. Because of how toxic she was, she could never really hold a stable relationship for very long, and when she did, it was only long enough to have kids with various people and then have a fallout with the guys, which has happened several times, but it wasn't uncommon for her to bring around ex-cons or druggies, which is an example of who my half-brother's father is. When I was a kid too, she would also get in trouble making fraudulent checks, among other things, but because of how many men she'd go through, I learned fairly quickly not to get attached to any of them, which is why my grandfather is the closest I have to a father. I even remember several times getting woken up in the middle of the night by her, just so she could go to see random guys in hotels. One time there wasn't a place for me to sleep, so I just slept in the corner on the floor while I could hear A and this guy going at it across the room on the only bed that was there in the hotel room. I have so many stories, this was just some of them, which I can share more of. Our major falling out nearly 2.5 years ago was when she pulled me out of a vehicle, threw me up against the side of it and tried to kick me and scratch at my face, the aftermath of which led to a chunk of the back of my hair getting bloody and ripped out and my sides getting bruised enough to where it hurt to breathe in for nearly 2 weeks straight, but still I didn't go to the cops because my family didn't want me to out what was happening, which I also have text record evidence that I can request of family members admitting that these events happened, and of course my mother made herself out to be a victim by trying to downplay what happened to everyone and trying to turn the situation against me by saying how I knocked her glasses off while I was trying to get her to stop clawing at my face. After that I cut her off completely, no contact. She still had the ability to reach out to me if she wanted to or if there was an emergency, she just never did. Part 2. Again, this is a lot to write out and people said that it should be spaced out better, so I'm cutting this into multiple parts to make it easier to read and understand. So my mother has always been like that in general. I had records and text threads that I can request to show evidence of her trying to reverse blame me for situations where she just didn't want to take responsibility for, and when she wasn't passing off her kids to be taken care of by their grandparents, she was passing them off to me as the parentified older sibling, acting as the third parent, which was one of the other reasons I decided to cut her off. After I cut her off and moved, I started building up my life by myself more, getting in a better place mentally and physically, got a new job, and started dating, and eventually I decided to start seeing my half-siblings, only relation to which is through my mother, through their fathers instead of through her, since I couldn't stand being around her and either dealing with her toxic crap fest or just having the kids passed off to me while she goes to do whatever. One time for several months straight she was trying to support an adult baby, pacifier and all, driving them around and paying for their stuff instead of trying to support and use her money for what her own children and family needed. She's always been like that. Any other person she'd go all out for to get social points or whatever gratification she thought she was getting from it, while if any of her children opposed what she said or tried to do anything else, she would be abusive physically and verbally. So I started seeing some of my half-siblings away from her and eventually became friends with one of her exes. It had just turned out we had a lot in common with our interests in general and we just became friends. For context, this ex had split off and moved away from my mother due to seeing and having to deal with a lot of her toxic crap right after kids and left several states away. But we started becoming close friends and eventually I initiated a relationship, and from my side of the family my grandparents were the only people I talked to and maintained contact with because of how toxic my mother was and how disassociated I was from her closer relatives like aunts and uncles, so when we tried for kid and I was pregnant she ended up finding out through them. I never actually wanted her to know, at least until after the fact. For one, I was no contact already and had been for a while, and she's been very physically abusive. I didn't want her to try anything crazy and ending up hurting me while I was pregnant, but towards the end of the pregnancy she found out anyway. Part 3. Okay, so some people needed more context and wanted to know more about Part 3 and 4, so here is the gist of what happened. Also, thanks for anyone even taking the time to upvote or comment in the first place. I didn't think this would get as many VWs as it did. Also, feel free to reach out if you want any of the evidence or my Facebook info. I'll also be sharing on TikTok soon too, and sorry if this is a lot at all, this is two different parts together. So pretty much for context, my grandparents were the first ones that found out about my pregnancy, and they were pretty overjoyed to have a great grandchild. Especially my grandfather Hess, like a dad to me. I even asked him to walk me down the aisle in place of a father after me and my fiancée, Kay, got engaged. People also wanted to know more about my age and stuff. I didn't know what all was included in these posts a lot before, since this was my first time posting on here when I first made these, but I'm nearly 20. I'm gonna be in like 3 months. Mine and Kay's daughter is 6 months old now. So my mother found out that I was pregnant and we called. For more context, I had cut her out nearly 2.5 years before this because of how she wouldn't apologize or take accountability for how she physically assaulted me multiple times, which I also have records of family admitting to and hospital records of questionnaires I had to answer during appointments to make sure I wasn't relapsing with my self-harm/depression at all due to the trauma she's caused me. But me and my mother, called, and I had to deal with telling her and talking to her about everything, which got nowhere to say the least. She said, "How dare I? That I'll pay," and that's exactly stuff that would come out of my mouth, and also about how she'd make me pay and how I would never see my step-siblings again, and neither would my Kay. And then there was nothing. With about a week of silence, not once did she even acknowledge that she now had a grandchild or if I was okay at all in my pregnancy. After the week of silence, we had established communications again, and me and she started love bombing me like crazy, summing all of her responses up to just her emotions and how it was justified completely. Never actually uttered the word "I'm sorry," just tried to justify everything. Then she tried to ask more about my pregnancy and how everything was going with it, and now suddenly incredibly enthusiastic about my new baby and me. I tried to establish that we need to work on our relationship first and everything that's happened in our past and rebuild if I was genuinely serious about wanting to form a bond now, but that wasn't even acknowledged in the first place. This was around when I was 7 months pregnant, I believe, possibly a little earlier than that. But after that she would constantly love bomb, even went to the extent to send gifts off and on, and the co-parent thing A and K had with their kids continued like normal, but there was the occasional comment she said about me which poked at my insecurities, and anytime I tried to bring those up to her she would just chalk it up again to emotions or just not even acknowledge or deflect it completely. Now, the old town we were living in at the time, my mother had old friends in that were active friends with her still for context, but around this time we noticed we were being followed by different specific vehicles, or weird things would happen in general. Like one time we had a car which went by our home and tried to take pictures and videos of our house and home several times, or there was also several instances where we would wake up to someone just idling in front of our driveway at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. Just weird stuff like that. There's a few other things, but I don't want to make this too long. On Valentine's that year, Kate proposed and we got engaged. My grandfather was especially happy and commented how beautiful the ring was. My grandmother also saw and congratulated us. I wasn't gonna tell my mother because I already knew how she was with my life events in general, let alone anything to do with my new BF, well, fiancé now. But she found out through the grapevine. She told me how I didn't have to hide it from her. I didn't hide it, I just also didn't talk about. And then she just commented how she either used the word tacky or stupid, I don't remember which it was, but I have the text record, to propose on Valentine's Day in the first place, and how much of a dumb romantic I was. No wonder I didn't share it with her at first. Anyways, eventually I was going into labor at like 42 weeks, yeah, overdue lol, and during my birth extended family was contacting me as well as my grandparents, constantly checking in the entire time, but my mother? Barely a word the entire time. But after nearly an entire day of being in labor, I gave birth to my perfectly healthy baby girl, which we got to take home a few days later. My grandmother even sent flowers. Thanks again, BTW. She's reading this though. Then I got a TPO randomly against K. We only found out about this later on, which is normally given to domestic abuse victims to be able to leave their situation, and because of that the abuser doesn't get any notification of it at all. For one, she was several states away and was under no threat from him, let alone domestic abuse like what. So I don't even know why she was allowed this in the first place. and I only use the quotations in this case because K isn't an actual abuser. I know temporary protection orders are genuinely useful for actual victims. This is also when we noticed we were really being stalked, and about 4 months later we see her friends on Facebook, the ones I mentioned lived in the same area, make fake wanted persons reports against my fiancé, which I saved evidence of. It claimed he was a wanted person for abuse and child neglect, absolute lies BTW, and how he was in several state registries. He also was in another lodge, and to hunt us down or to notify law enforcement if they see us. These public posts contain pictures of our home, vehicles, of us, our address, contact and our numbers, and pictures the 2 kids K had at the time with us, as well as descriptions of everyone. A day or two later, while K was at work and I was at home taking care of my baby while A and K's 2 kids were hanging around somewhere in the house, nearly 8 cops pulled up with guns out with a CPS worker, and we got SWAT teamed under the guise of the false reports and claims as a CPS report A filed stating K had abused one of the kids, which is also a lie, and I've seen the report too. She even tried to claim the abuse happened when the kid was with her in her care. Like, what? At least get the timing right. I had to deal with being surrounded by cops with guns out and a CPS pushing for info, all with a baby in my arms, and K wasn't even home. I had to get him to come home from work to help deal with everything. There was also false claims and reports about K having tons of guns and weapons and how he was armed like never before was the literal wording that was used. The cops SWAT teamed us and found out the hard way the claims and reports were all false and that everyone was completely fine and not in any danger. This was also around the time where I would have just conceived my second baby BTW. Apparently A was also already on her way to get the other kids without letting us know. It just so happened that CPS and law enforcement intervened first, and we had found out she and one of her friends made the report in another state and was now expecting to just take all the kids under the guise of this report, and the CPS work was all for this. Meanwhile, the cops were nearly laughing in the background. I know I saw one of them donut lovers chuckling behind me, no offense to cops, about how crazy the false reports were. And like the dummy he was, K gave a kids to her because she sent threads of messages about how much time the kids could spend together and how good this will be for everyone and how the next holidays everyone can be together and how K and Dem will get to know and become friends with her current friends. It sounded literally crazy looking back on it now from a third-party perspective, as well as how they all returned to their normal 50-50 co-parent arrangement after 4 weeks, and K went with it and they met up and A took the 2 kids with her back to her state. 4 weeks later, K gets an email saying how A will make sure that he will never see the kids again under the guise of the report that she literally admitted to one of her friends making, and I now have evidence of another one of her friends admitting that this was a whole premeditatively planned thing, which, taking into consideration the false reports and claims as what those led to now, is incredibly illegal. Due to all of this, we were not only being completely obviously stalked now, but because of how our addresses were spread and info, as well as paired with the fake wanted posts, random people started to chase us and follow us around, several times with weapons. We had to uproot our lives and move away in a rush, and in the process, with all the stress because of these events, I ended up miscarrying my second child. Part 4. So around this time I get mailed a large treadmill in the mail from my mother to lose the pregnancy weight from my first child. She didn't know I miscarried then, so it was about my first. I've never once used exercising equipment and have never been overweight, actually underweight a lot of my childhood because of how I struggled with depression and my self-worth and image. She knew this. You just wouldn't think someone would spend that much money to mail something that large just for that. Then I saw through K, my fiancé's, Facebook that my mother was posting online on Facebook that I was barely 18. Not true. I'm nearly 20, like I'm gonna be in 3 months. How my stepfather impregnated me. WTF, no, he was never my stepfather. I was mainly raised by my grandparents and I only started dating after I was a legal adult and was well off and starting my own damn life. I was also with and had dated multiple other people before my fiancé. Derek was a jerk though, tbh, and I initiated my current relationship after I decided I didn't want to deal with my toxic mother anytime I wanted to see my half-siblings. And WTF, are we in an alien movie? Like, who TF uses the word impregnate other to obviously make a fake story sound more dramatic? I wanted to and tried for a child and had my beautiful baby girl, which I wouldn't change for the world, and that he was a molester of her kids. He wasn't, and even based on the own CPS report her friend filed, that wasn't what it said at all, and I saw the report and have a copy of it. Refer back to part 3, and that he physically and verbally abuses her oldest. I'm my mother's oldest and I've never been verbally or physically abused by K, but I have plenty of evidence of her doing that to me, even hospital records of the past trauma from her. So I get what she's trying to achieve by claiming that, and that she was parentally alienated from me, Like BCH, I left as a legal adult to start my own life after I had it with being abused. I cut her off after she threw me up against a vehicle just for saying something she didn't agree with, and she was never alienated from me. She could have reached out to me, especially if there was an emergency. I left her my contact for that. I just stopped initiated interactions, so she never reached out, as well as that I'm currently missing and in danger. I'm not missing, nor am I in danger, and how my baby is also in danger. She's not. She's completely safe, which I've also shared proof of online. But if I have to deal with missing persons reports because of this crap. I also posted about how much she was struggling now having full legal custody of all of her kids and how she was needing free stuff. She don't lol, she doesn't have full legal custody of nothing. It's still split custody, and law enforcement has pretty much dismissed everything she's claimed and reported legally because of how many lies were in it, especially with the claims about weapons. I tried to make my own Facebook account at least 3 different times, but each time I did I had to immediately appeal because apparently I had a past account that had gotten revoked for bad behavior. Essentially, I've never been on Facebook in my life and this was my first time making an account, but anytime I also tried to load the page which would show me the evidence of such, it just gave me an error screen. Eventually I got a hold of their full support team and was able to do age verification and show identity, and I was able to finally make my dang account. I posted more posts about me being in danger and missing and how she needs people to find me and how concerned she was as a mother for me, but also posted a be on the lookout post about me for her own area several states away. Like what? And when I got online to respond to these, I was immediately blocked once she saw me online without a word from her. It's about her blocking me. A can do what she wants. It's the fact that now I gotta deal with you acting like a concerned mother saying I'm missing, but at the same time won't even acknowledge I exist when you actually see my stuff. Anyways, I've been posting proof of the various incidents and I fully intend to post more as I get the evidence and records to me. I'll also be on TikTok soon too as well. I know the opinions and bias about being in an age gap relationship in the first place, but genuinely am happy in my relationship and it's never been like how my mother's lied about, and I've already lost so much because of the events that she caused. One of her friends also tried to message me indirectly from a secondary site aside from Facebook, cause you can't just confront me directly, right? With a fake alt account trying to say how I started dating in high school and when I was a young teenager and how they knew me, but you also refuse to face me directly at the same time. Like what, Lamau? For someone that talks a lot of crap, you really don't know much about my life. I dropped out of high school when I was like 16 and I only started dating after I was a legal adult, after I had cut contact with my mom, moved away from her and got a new job, and had dated several people before my now fiancé/K. Like what, you don't get to claim to know me but at the same time claim absolute BS, which I can easily disprove with records, and won't show me who you actually are at the same time. I later found out this was just one of my mom's current friends trying to hijack some of my posts, the same one that actually admitted to my mother pre-planning this entire thing, and most of everything they said was just bantha SHT. Anyways, thanks for reading. Hope whoever reads this is doing well, and follow along for any more updates of my crazy life events if you all want more drama. Update aka full part 5. Okay, this has been a lot, but here is the full update. Context of my past posts: my mother was physically and mentally abusive throughout my childhood, which I have hospital records for and third-party evidence of family members admitting to know about it, and we've never had a good relationship because of that. I did eventually get into Facebook. After I had to do extra age verification and go through several full help people, I was finally able to make my account. For context, I wasn't able to get in for like the first 4 attempts because Facebook claimed I already had a past account that pretty much got banned for past behavior, which I had to settle because this was my first time ever making an account in the first place, and I immediately had to appeal the moment I first had to make my account, so I never even had a chance to use Facebook, let alone do anything that violated guidelines. I posted evidence of the fake claims and false wanted person stuff. I'll also be posting the medical records I have of dealing with the trauma from my mother on there as well once they get to me, because my side isn't just me making up lies. I have full third-party evidence. I also have text threads of different extended family admitting to knowing about the different stuff she did too. For more clarification, I am nearly 20, like I'm gonna be in these next couple months. My baby is 6 months old, you guys do the math. I did get engaged with my mother's ex, and I'm currently, but it wasn't in any of the kind of ways people have been making up the lies about with, which I can also show evidence for. That's also part of the reason nobody from A or as friends will directly counter the evidence I've been posting on record. They'll only respond to my stuff through fake accounts on alternative sites away from Facebook because I've caught them in a lot of lies. As I explained, I had started my own life, got my own job, and was dating for a while before I initiated the relationship, so at the most it's just an age gap relationship. It wasn't all this weird stuff that they're making up. and my fiancé wasn't around me when I was young like my mother or her friends have tried to claim, either, which there's also records for, and 2, who said I was made to resent my mother. That's completely not true at all. She did that herself. I cut contact with her and started up my own life way before my current relationship, and Terry's probably a reason you never addressed my first 2 parts going over specific events I can recall just off the top of my head that she's done, because that would be acknowledging she did abuse me, which again hospital records which I'll eventually have to share. Same with the CPS report which claimed one of my half-siblings was being abused, that was made up by my mother and her friends, which had obvious stuff wrong with it. She even tried to claim it happened when she had the kid. Like what? My mother also posted another thing about me being missing and how concerned she was about me, and when I countered stating I wasn't, she just blocked me. Which I couldn't care less about the blocking part if it wasn't for the fact that she's spreading that I'm missing and in danger when I'm not, which if people buy it enough I could deal with false missing persons reports, which I've tried my best to show I'm not missing lol. But it's the point that she can act like she's concerned about me, but the moment she sees my stuff and me I'm blocked without a word. It's just my point that how she acts privately versus to the public is night and day. And 2, one of my mother's friends who tried to spread more BS on my posts. I never started dating in high school. I only started dating after I was a legal adult in the first place, and even before that I dropped out of high school before my 3rd year when I was like 16, which I definitely wasn't dating then in the first place. So for someone that talks a lot of crap, you really don't know much about what actually happened throughout my life lol. This was from a comment I got. The definition of grooming has been changed and altered so much from what it originally meant that at this point a lot of people just use it as an attack term for relationships people don't agree with, and I would agree with this considering in several age gap relationships groups people were calling grown adults well past the age of minors groomers because the older person, there was examples of both women and men, had like a 15-year age gap. Like these people are legal adults lamau. And guess what, that's all that's gonna matter once we do take full legal action. What was legal, and I only started dating my fiancé after I was a legal adult again, has not abusive. The most we have is an age gap relationship. And throughout the entire time we had to uproot our lives because our address, pictures of our vehicle, of us, of our home, phone numbers, descriptions were all illegally blasted online with fake wanted persons reports made by his friends. And this is important, these things weren't made by law enforcement or any other legitimate group. These were made by my mother and her friends. The cops saw nobody was in danger after we got SWAT teamed under fake claims and reports, also illegal, and in the process of dealing with this we got chased down and stalked by several random people on multiple occasions. All the stress of uprooting our lives and dealing with all the BS led to me getting so stressed out I miscarried my 2nd child. I have lost too much. I'm not groomed into hating people. I've been pushed for too long dealing with my mother, and I've lost things I'll never get back in the process due to different events. And I'm not trashing her online. I never wanted to bring this stuff public, but when you have all your private information blasted online with easily disprovable lies as well as claims that you're in danger and missing, I was kind of forced to. And yeah, Terry's probably a reason they will only respond to me with fake accounts on other sites. I've also shown proof that me and my baby especially are perfectly fine and safe. Obviously I've lost a lot, but physically we're safe and not being abused or in danger. I also have evidence of one of my mother's friends admitting to these entire events as being premeditatively planned, which is highly illegal considering the fake reports and claims, and it really is ironic one of my mother's friends was trying to spread more BS and lies about stuff and ended up admitting to that in the process, so thanks for that I guess. So I'm gonna keep sharing records and evidence, and if anyone can't find part 3 or 4 it's because mods removed my post because people were sharing them in random groups that it didn't belong in until they eventually just took the posts down altogether. If anyone wants those parts I still have tech copy and pasted down and I can share if anyone wants to reach out. But yeah, that's what's going on. Otherwise I'm just chilling and working on getting my plant business set up. How are you guys doing? Good? Okay then. If anyone wants part 3 or 4 they're gonna have to reach out to me as it got removed. It mainly just went over how my first pregnancy went, having to deal with fake wanted reports, uprooting our lives, dealing with law enforcement and getting SWAT teamed as well as the CPS BS, and how a few other events happened. Edit, should I try to repost part 3 or 4? Edit/mini update. Since you guys said you wanted to know any updates at all with what happens. I recently found out my mother can't get a lawyer or legal help right now to help justify any of her false reports or fake claims at all. Like lawyers are literally looking at what she's claimed and either fully refusing to help in the first place due to what she's been spreading around online and what she's made up on reports with easily disprovable lies. Or one person was claiming that one lawyer would have upcharged her thousands of dollars just to defend her with what she was making up legally or otherwise, so that's looking good for us on that part at least. So I have full confirmation now that cops and law enforcement and even lawyers have literally been dismissing her because of the nature of it in the first place. I've also reached out to another one of my extended family members to confirm whether or not she actually gave my numbers to any of the family that didn't have them while I was pregnant. I mainly want to know this because she said she shared my number with several extended family members that wanted me to contact them when I was pregnant, but I never had their numbers then, but nobody ever contacted me. So if she never actually shared my numbers with them, I would have text records showing it, and at that time she's lied. She has quite the history of lying in general, so this is why I really want proof of these times on record due to the nature of the reports and claims she's made. Lol, I'm just gonna keep sharing evidence online. Reach out to me if you want to see my Facebook at all, because that's where I'm posting a lot of different evidence, or if anyone else wants more of the drama in general at all. Please like and subscribe for more complete stories. Thank you.